Okay, class, I want to give you some further examples from the book so that you can hopefully understand what you're reading. This is from example 1 from the chapter 3, where it's doing the Fifth Avenue Industries. So first off, here's the things you need to understand. First off, in this problem, your goal is to maximize the profit by identifying how many of each tie you need to make, okay? So that's your goal right now. So step number 1 would be to determine the variables that you're going to use to identify them. So we'll use S for a number of silk ties, P for number of polyester, B1 for blend 1, B2 for blend 2. This is how many of each of those we want to make, right? So we just determine that so that we can use that in Excel. The next thing you want to do is you need to determine your profit. So for silk ties, you're using 0.125 yards of silk per yard. Okay, and so if it's $20 per yard, you can just multiply 20 times 0.125 and you find out that it costs you $2.50 in materials. For the polyester blend, you use 0.08 yards. It's $6 per yard, and so 0.08 times 6 is 0.48 per tie for the all polyester. For blend 1, same idea. You're going to use, since it's 50% polyethylene and 50% cotton, you can do 0.5 times 3 plus 0.5 times 9. Those are 3 is the cost for the poly, 9 is the cost for the cotton, and that gives you $7.50. So now what you know here is that it's $7.50 for this type of tie per yard. So you still have to find out how much it is per tie. Since that is 0.1 per tie material required, you're going to multiply that by 7.5 and you get 0.75. B2, same idea. You need to find out how much it would cost you for this blend. So 0.3 times 6 plus 0.7 times 9 would give you $8.10 per yard of material. So since it's 0.1 yards used on that, you'd had 0.1 times 8.1 and that gives you 0.81 per tie. Now that we know what the material costs us, we also have to recognize that it's 75 cents for labor. So we're going to include that into our net profit. We need to find our net profit. You have to know how much you'll make in order to maximize your profit. And so you'll find the net profit by subtracting this from the selling price, the expenses. So selling price minus the expenses. In this case, you find that by $6.70 is what you're selling the silk tie for. You subtract the $2.50 for the materials, the 75 cents for labor, and you get $3.45. And then same thing for all of these. These are the price you're selling it for. This is the cost for materials. This is the cost of labor. And this is the total cost for each type of tie. So your maximum profit then would be these prices times each type. So $3.45 times the silk tie, number of silk ties you make, plus $2.32 plus the number of polyester ties, and so forth. Okay, this is your maximum profit equation. It's important to identify that because that's how you know what you're doing to solve it. Now, determining the constraints. This can be a little bit difficult, but you have to remember there's going to be a maximum number of stuff and a minimum number of stuff. And so you have to think this out logically, okay? You know that you only use 0.125 yards for each silk tie. So you don't know how many silk ties you're going to make, but you know you have to make less than 1,000 because that's the number of ties that is expected of you each month. That's your available amount each month is 1,000, and that's according to your reading. This one right here, this is your polyester being used. Your polyester, it's easy, right here, this 0.08, that's how much polyester you use per yard, right? So that's your polyester for the all polyester ties. This 0.05 for B1, the way that is found is down here. So you're going to take the fact that for B1, it's 0.1 yards of silk to make the tie, but that's only 50% of that tie. And so you're going to find the 0.05 from multiplying 0.1 times the 50% of the tie, which is 5%. So that's where 5% changes to a decimal and gives you 0.05 for B1. B2 is the same way. You have to find out how much you're using for that one only. Out of the 0.1 yards of silk, you're only using 30% of it, so that would multiply and give you 3%. So you're doing 3% times the B2 type. All of that has to be less than 2,000, which is the maximum amount of ties you can make for that month. So this right here is the cotton ties. It's the same idea, the 0.05. These are, you have 0.1 yards of material. That's 50% of the tie, which is going to be cotton. So that's 5%. Change to a decimal. There's your 0.05 for blend 1. Here you have 0.1 yards of material. It's 70% of the tie. So since it's 70% of that tie, that's 7% of cotton being used, which is out of a yard, and that is 0.07 of B2. That all has to be less than 2,500 available. Or sorry, 1,250 available. This right here, the silk, you have to make more than 6,000 of those because that's the minimum amount according to your reading, right? Minimum contract amount. This right here for silk ties, you have to make less than 7,000 though. That's the maximum amount you can make. Minimum amount of polyester, maximum amount of polyesters. Minimum amount of B1 blend, maximum amount of B1 blend. Minimum amount B2 blend, maximum amount B2 blend. Now we have identified all of our constraints that are here in green. We can now go to our Excel worksheet. Now I've already filled in a lot of the Excel worksheet. The gold up here, this is the solutions we're looking for. How many of each of these types are we making? Okay, so number of units for each of these. Remember, this is $6.70 is what we're selling it for. The 75 cents is our labor cost, and the $2.50 is the cost of material. We need to take that amount, and we need to find the profit for each of those. And the way we find the profit for each of those is we start with an equal sign, and we're going to select the first one, and from that we're going to subtract the second one and subtract the third one. And we can hit enter. We don't want any of those to be absolute because they're going to change for each type of tie. But we're going to drag the green box, remember the green box, and we're going to drag that all the way across so that we can get the maximum profit for each of those. Now over here, we also want to find out the sum product of all of these that will go into here, okay? So the way we do that, we start with our equal sign, and we want to start typing in sum product, and you can see it here. You double click on sum product. So you start typing in sum. We want all of this row, comma, to multiply by all of the unknowns here, okay? And so we want to make these unknowns, though, they're the same unknowns for all of these, for the labor costs and everything else. And so we're going to hit F4 in the middle of B6 and E6 in order to help us make those absolute so we can drag it through the other problems. Oops, gotta undo that, made that mistake. Okay, so we hit enter, and now again I'm going to click on that box, drag the green corner box down to the other two so that all of them are using this same B6 through E6, but they're using their own individual values here. Now this we want to also drag over from the previous one because we want it to be the total of this column here. Okay, right now it's going to be 0, and that works for us. Our constraints are put in. Yards of silk, for S it was 0.125 S, right? And we know that that amount has to be less than or equal to 1,000, right? And this is our second constraint. And our third constraint, there's one silk tie that you have to make less. For each one silk tie, it has to amount to 7,000, right? You have a maximum of 7,000 or a minimum of 7,000. And so forth here, one polyester, one B1, one B2. And same for the maximum amounts. All of them are one of each variable that has to be greater than these amounts over here. Alright, so now we're finally going to put this in a solver. We want to click in F10 because that's where we want all the calculations to come to, okay? So the way we do that is we go to solver. It's in our data area. We click on solver. Up here, it should be F10 that we have selected for our set objective. We want our maximum selected. Right here, we're going to change the group variables. The ones we're changing are up here, B6 through E6. Now, I kind of jumped ahead of myself. I forgot that we also need to put our equation here. So we're going to start with an equal sign here. This is also a sum product, so you start typing in sum product. And it's just going to be this entire row and comma, and it's going to be also where we want our solutions, which is up here. Now that's going to be the same for all of these, so we want to make this absolute by hitting F4 in between B6 and E6 and hitting enter. And then we're going to take that, drag the green box all the way down through all of these. And yes, they say 0, but that's okay because we haven't done any calculations yet using Solver. Okay, now going back to Solver, we want to be clicked again right here in F10, going back up to our Solver. And what we're going to do is we're going to put on our constraints. So we're going to click in here, add, and the first constraints we want to do, you notice that I have these lined up to where these are all the less thans, all the way down here through 17. These are all the less thans. All the maximums I have at the bottom together. So, sorry, all the minimums are at the bottom, all the maximums are up here. So, in other words, we want this less than or equal to symbol, which we have already. The cells that we want to reference are all of these ones right here, F12 through F22. And the constraints are these numbers over here. Sorry, this is not through F22. Let me correct that. It is through, so let me just delete all that. And we only want the ones that are less than or equal to. So that is through 18 maximums. And here, this one is also H12 through H18. And we're going to click OK. And then we need to add another constraint in here. And that constraint is going to be for our minimums. So we want this column here of F19 through F22. And we want to change this because these all have to be greater than or equal to the constraints for these, which are a minimum of silk 6,000 through 6,000. All right, we're going to click OK. Right here, we want this to be our simplex LP. When you go into our options, we'll change this. We're just going to change this to 100 or 10,000. I don't know. We're going to throw in some high numbers here, and we'll do this one as 100,000, and this one as 100,000, and we're going to click OK. And then we're going to solve this. Okay. If we've done everything right, we should have the correct solutions up top. So, I'm looking up here, 7,000, that's the correct solution. 3,625 is the correct solution. 13,100 is the correct solution. And 8,500 is the correct solution. The total maximum profit that we can expect then is $120,196. Okay, and so that's the total amount that we can expect to make out of this. Now remember, these are the total sum of each of these times the product of these, and we subtracted those from each other to get this amount. That means we're subtracting the total amount we're going to make minus the expenses. This is labor, and this is the cost of each tie to give us our total profit right here. And so this is the total profit we can expect to make. All right, well, I know I had to rush through this a little bit quickly, but I hope that it helps you out somewhat.